Welcome agents. Some time ago I asked you guys what changes needed to be made for Title Update 5, with most of them not making the cut this time around. Now it might sound like I'm repeating myself here, but I think it's worth revisiting some of these changes and talking about some new ones for the next update, which will likely be Title Update 6, because there are still some real issues the game needs to address. Now if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below, subscribe for dedicated Division content, and let's get to it. Okay, so like I said, it may sound like I'm repeating myself here, but I think the only way the devs will make changes we want is to never forget about them. So I think I'm just going to keep pushing it to the forefront. We're going to talk about Recalibration Station, loot, RNG, PvP, and some other little bits and bobs here. Now, Title Update 5 will be bringing no changes to the Recalibration Station. Sure, you'll now be able to recalibrate crafted gear, but that's more of a change to the crafting system than it is to recalibration. I've said it before and I'll say it again, the recalibration system could be very easily changed to relieve a lot of the RNG issues the game faces, and there is a major RNG issue with the game. For anyone who thinks the RNG in this game isn't bad, I would love for you to comment down below and explain why you think so, because I've had those comments before but with no real substance. Why do you think having a 0.0046% chance of getting the piece of gear you want is acceptable? I'd be interested to see the counter argument to that. Anyway, as I was saying, the RNG in the game is bad, but all hope is not lost, because some simple changes can help that a lot, starting with the recalibration system. What I ask is that massive please just allow us to recalibrate one stat and one talent. I'm pretty sure that that's actually a simple change, and I think it'd be very welcome in the community. Every time someone talks about the recalibration station, this always seems to come up. One stat and one talent. And yeah, that might not be the be all and end all, but I think at least for now, that would really help the RNG in the game. And like I said, from where I'm sitting, it doesn't appear to be a very difficult change, and in fact, a very simple one that I think everyone will be happy about. Now, PvP is a major issue the game has faced since day one. In fact, I think PvP right now is worse than it's ever been. What with the changes to TU4 increasing the time to kill significantly, and then we have the changes to shotguns, the base damage being increased, coupled with the premeditated talent causing a one-shot and two-shot shotgun meta. What I mean by time to kill being significantly increased, what I mean by that is the overall armor and stuff being increased, thus time to kills being increased. The actual time to kill, i.e. the PvP modifier never changed at all. Now, there's always going to be a meta, that's a fact, but I do agree the shotgun meta is pretty bad because it is so superior to anything else in the game, it's just really unfair. Now, unlike the metas we've seen in the Division, we had, the 6-piece striker meta, the one-shot seeker mine meta. These were really strong, but it's not like there weren't other really good builds that could compete. I remember running 6-piece Nomad, again, really strong. 6-piece Lone Star was really strong, and there was so many more. We had the high-end builds that could compete, and whilst we did have metas, striker and seeker mines, there were other builds that were nearly as strong, if not just as strong, in the right hands. Now, it's good to hear the recent news that the time to kill will be lowered, and that's to combat the shotgun meta, so we should see an increase in other builds that are as strong as the shotgun meta, so everything else should be a lot more viable, so we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Now, this appears to be a positive move on paper, so that's good, but what else? Now, PvP won't be saved by balancing. If the devs found the perfect formula so that everything was viable, would you suddenly start playing PvP if you now don't? I don't think so. I don't think I would. PvP is generally just not fun, and actually what makes PvP fun sometimes is the imbalance. Just go back to the Division and the imbalance when it came to PvP. But it was fun, because it was just fun to play. Actually, I am lying a little bit. Conflict is not fun. The additions of Rogue into the Occupied Dark Zone and changes to Manhunts look to actually be really good. And likewise for the regular Dark Zones, I think generally they're okay, but Conflict is and will be barren, a boring game mode unless some changes are made. The Division PvP was a mess, but it had some major replayability features that the Division 2 could do with right now. I think the medkit needs to be changed back to how it works in the Division, with a fast application that could be done whilst moving. While skills and skill builds appear to be going in the right direction and will likely be very viable in TU5, the applications of skills are still likely to be very slow and unresponsive for the most part, and I'd like to see these reworked to be a little bit more quicker and used in fight rather than before a fight. But I think even things like this don't make PvP any more fun. It will just make it bearable. So I think really they need to add some new modes, new maps, and other things on top of all of these changes to make it a fun experience. One of you agents mentioned a hardcore PvP mode, which I think could actually be really, really cool. No minimap and increased damage. More game modes like Hardpoint, for example, or a Division equivalent, maybe something like Last Stand. Now, I think having something like Hardpoint, like a zone that you had to attack or defend for a period of time, could be a good mode to have, especially when you think about how the skills could be used to defend or attack a point. I think the incentives for PvP need to be much greater. There are some things I don't think the devs can do much about, like movement, for example, which is a shame, but I just don't think there's no point talking about it because I don't think there's really anything they can do about it right now. Ultimately, PvP needs a serious look at and a huge overhaul, the like we've just seen in skills, and I don't think it will be long before that happens, so I do hope PvP is seriously considered for TU6. On a side note, before we move on, I've seen many reports from the PTS that skills within the Occupied Dark Zone are too powerful, with one-shot seekers, one-shot sniper turrets, and more one-shot skills. Now, I actually put this to Frederick Thylander, who confirmed, firstly, that the strengths of skills within the ODZ is currently set to 20%, and he also said, seekers can be dodged, they have an arming time, sniper turrets can be broken, skills are a part of the game. I'd rather work on refining the counterplay than just dialing them down to the point where only healing skills are used. Now, what do you agents think of this response in respect of a possible, one-shot skills being in TU5 within the ODZ? Now, I think Frederick hit it right on the head, to be honest. Skills are going to be very powerful. The same way DPS builds will likely be very powerful if you spec into them properly, and the same for tank builds. So I'm looking forward to see how this works out. I don't know how it's going to work out. The idea of having one-shot seekers is quite scary, because I remember one-shot seekers from the Division 1, but they don't work the same in the Division 2. And like Frederick said, they can be dodged. Sniper turrets, their line of sight can be broken. So there are ways to counter these, as long as they're balanced, and that's what this testing is for. We are in the last phase of the PTS in respect of quality of life testing, including skills, so let's just see what happens. Okay, moving on, and what else? Now, just like the Division, I think the Division 2 struggles when it comes to balancing the weapons within the game. There are a couple of weapons which perform the best, not by a marginal amount, but in some cases a very significant amount. We have the P416 assault rifle, any slow RPM, LMG, etc. These are the top weapons. And there are so many weapons that are simply not up to par, including the new exotics from what I've seen. Now, I don't dispute that there will always be, again, a meta couple of weapons, but I'd like to see some real balancing going to these weapons. Take the P416 as the high ceiling, just like how they've buffed skills, and then bring all the weapons up to this ceiling. It doesn't have to be perfect, of course, because I think there are some clear outliers, and the remaining weapons need to be buffed up to this standard. Take the M60, for example, probably the best LMG in the game, because it's a slow RPM and high damage, whereas the MG5 seems non-existent. And part of that is to do with the lower magazine size and lack of sustain, which is paramount in this game due to the high time to kill. A lower time to kill and a buff of these weapons could see someone like the MG5 as a viable weapon in the future. And I hope so, because, not for me personally, but I love the MG5. The MG5 is one of my favourite weapons there is. But I just think overall, when I pick up weapons generally, if it's not a P416 or, if it's not an M60, then I'm really not going to be using it. SMGs to me don't even appear to be even remotely viable at this point. Again, just due to the high time to kill and the low magazine size, when you've got LMGs that can fire 200 bullets and do a lot of damage. So yeah, I think there's a lot of weapons here that need to be looked at, and I don't think it's just a weapons issue. Again, I think there's time to kill that comes into it. So with the changes being made to time to kill to lower it down, maybe we're going to see weapons like the MG5, maybe like SMGs be more viable in a future update. I don't know. Next, and I know this will be controversial, previously the devs talked about a gear score increase from 500 to 515, and I actually only think it's a matter of time before this happens. So what do you think about this increase for TU6? Now, I've played Destiny for years, so I'm actually really used to frequent gear score increases, so personally I would love one, but it needs to be done correctly. There has to be a way for us to increase the gear score of our current gear up to the new gear score. Some people, myself included, like to farm for new gear at the higher gear score level, but others have likely invested a lot of time into their builds and should not be forced to abandon that just because of a new gear score. Destiny does this by allowing you to infuse higher gear score items into your lower gear score gear, moving it up to that higher gear score value. So you take, say, a 515 piece of gear and infuse it into a 500 gear score item, and then that item becomes a 515 gear score item. I guess the only real issue with this is at 515, I imagine the max attribute roll could be higher, so if you do want to infuse your gear score up, you will likely not be able to reach the full potential of that new gear score, or those maximum attribute rolls. So this is where I think we need the optimization station. Now, I think the optimization station needs to be in the game regardless of this, but it does kind of make sense here, allowing players who do not want to farm new 515 gear score items a chance at infusing their gear up to the new sort of new level gear score, and then the opportunity to maximize their gear to the new increased max attributes that come with it. Overall, I just think the optimization station needs to come back. And of course, they really need to, if they are going to increase the gear score, which they will do, I know they're going to do that soon, then this system needs to be in place. Because I guarantee you, if this is not in place, a lot of people will not, just simply won't put in the time and effort to get up to that new gear score, especially when you consider that loot and RNG overall it is a big issue. Last but not least, stripper zombies. No, I just saw someone comment this as I was writing the script, and I actually thought it was really funny. And to be honest, this would actually probably be more fun than conflict right now, so maybe this could be considered for a future update, I don't know. Anyway, let's just wrap it up for today's video. There is, of course, plenty more that could be added here, but I really think RNG, loot, recalibration, PvP and gear score should be looked at for TU6, alongside all the bugs and all that sort of stuff, which would just happen anyway. That's not really a title update, that's just kind of what happens. But thanks very much for watching today's video. I expect on Wednesday we'll find out when TU5 will come out, so remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss my coverage of that. With that said, until the next one, Epic out.